Hello. It's super exciting to be here with you today. I'm very excited to share my whole experience about play, and we were just playing actually just a couple of hours ago, and we had such a great time. And so my background is I'm basically a toy designer, and my passion was always I wanted to become like one of these play designers and creating toys for children. But I guess I was a child by myself, and that's why I said to, and I'm originally Turkish, so I'm just going to come to that part. And in Turkey, during time when I was growing up, we didn't have any toys, so I was always making my own toys, and I really wanted to be in that fantasy world and trying to see, you know, how we can actually move from one imagination to the other one. So I was looking for all these kind of materials and making things together out of them, and then all of a sudden, I found myself being in New York studying toy design. And this image for me is really important because I think it's the expression of how playfulness actually comes in different cultures. And this is from, you know, Turkish Ebru, and it's a marble art painting. And I think it's the beauty of it is like how color actually goes in and changes with just one dip of it, and then you can actually shape it and make something beautiful like this one. So that's why I kind of feel like play actually happens in every part of our lives. You don't maybe calling it play, but it's actually your playfulness that comes naturally. And when we ask the question of what is really play, as I said, it's kind of like it's in every detail you can find it. And in this picture, it's kind of like you see the light play. It's quite amazing like what you can do all these with the imaginative words. And this kind of looks like a very ghosty, but it's actually done in time. So play has this amazing timelessness inside it. It's this amazing way of actually losing yourself. And it's such a voluntary thing. So you are actually not forcing yourself to be inside it. So that's what you see it in children. You can't force a child to play. It's basically they are going to be playing, and if they want to be playful with you, they are going to come naturally into your world. And the most important thing is like you have been watching this amazing inventions and everything. It's like a play really is the highest form of research. It's because your mind is actually looking at different things. You are almost like scanning different kind of information, and your mind actually picks them up. They are actually putting all these kind of like small bits of things together so that you can make sense out of them. And that's why I love this image, because this is when the children are actually playing with a robot, and the robot was making kind of like random images, and they were trying to make some kind of sense out of them. So this is the time they are really researching and observing and exploring different things. And you know, the most amazing part of the playfulness is actually when your mind is making relationships with your nerves. It's the neurons here you are seeing. It's an amazing painting. They are actually making combinations. So every time, since the minute even just conceived and all the way till you die, you are actually making enormous amount of connections every minute. And with the connections that you are making it much more stable. So you know, in every play, you make so much more faster connections. It's because that's the time you are immersed into that experience. You are really, truly there, and you are not realizing it even. So even if you play like 1 minute or 2 minutes of kind of like a word game, you are just going to be immersed into it. And adapting yourself, I think that's the most important thing. This is coming from me, from my personal experience. When I was doing a lot of play research and play experiences and all of these things, I suddenly lost my dad. And during that time, I was trying to figure it out how I can make sense out of it. So because it's kind of your identity, and you start to see yourself from different perspectives, you understand that we have different foundations. And adaptation comes when you are actually letting yourself to play, and you are starting to make new connections with it, and you start to find and build a new identity for yourself. So it's exactly the same thing when children are actually from the start. They are first of all trying to understand who they are, how they can even make use of their hands, how they can even make use of their, feet so that they can walk. So this is exactly the same thing. You start to find your fundamental pieces, like how you can make sense out of the world you are in. And it's a compassion. It's very compassionate. It's in play, the minute that you are going to, for example, this is a really amazing story. It happened in the north of the world. And when the huskies are actually being chained and the bear comes along, almost going to attack, and then all of a sudden one of the huskies are waving their tail, kind of giving the impression of that we are playful, we want to be in connection with you. So then the bear stops to attack. It decides not to attack, and they start to become friends. And this whole relationship starts to continue over the years, and it becomes like a ritual. So in play, it's the fundamental thing for our own cultures to be created. Because of our senses we are living, we are actually, for example, we dance, we eat, what we sing, and all of these things becomes kind of like a playful activities which creates the rituals, the habits, and as a result, it becomes the cultures that we are into it. And so it's super important to create that empathy while you are playing. And it creates a positive way of looking at things. So for me, it's every time I look at any shadow or any kind of cloud, or even looking at the nature itself, I start to see these kind of like a beautiful playfulness into it. You are actually, at that time, you are playing with your mind. Like, how do you actually trick it? And how can you see different things all at once, although they are kind of factual in front of you? So this image just a coincidence that I saw a heart over there, but you can see many things. The other day, I was rowing with my friends, and I saw the trees. They kind of created like a terrier almost drinking water from the river, and I'm like, oh my God, this looks amazing. And they were like looking at me like, are you drunk or something? It's just like, you want to see, you can play with the sea, you see all these kind of visions, and it becomes such an amazing kind of positivity into your life. And humor. I think humor is the most fundamental piece in our lives, because that's the time you make different kind of unrelated connections. Your logic and your reasoning, this is the time it starts to shatter. It kind of goes into a complete different place. You start to laugh together, and that's the time you start to connect with each other. And in humor, you are also flexing whatever the stressful things for you, and you are starting to see in different perspectives. And we were just doing a couple of hours ago in the workshop, we were trying to do some kind of a silly kind of inventions, and they are super important because that's the time you are not really criticizing yourself. Instead, you are actually trying to understand what else can you do. You start to see different potentials within those kind of creations. And I think that's the beauty of the humorousness, and to keep that. And we always see it naturally in ourselves as just being human beings. And that's why we need to keep our humor much more closer to our heart. And with children, so I have done loads of research with children. I worked for Toys R Us, Lego, and Hasbro. And with Hasbro, I was especially doing futuring. So it was very interesting for me to see how children really think. And when you are researching with them, you have to be observant, of course. You can't go and ask them, like, what do you think about this? You really need to almost observe them and be like them. And you start to very quickly realize they are always in these kind of like fantasy worlds. They see a stick and they almost create a new friend next to them. They are walking around with that stick friend, and they are like making up conversations and stories. And it becomes such a beautiful, fundamental thing because they start to create their narration within themselves. That narration actually becomes their inner talk when we grow up. So every time we are kind of talking these days, go and talk to your own inner child. That's the child when he was a child, really a child, playing and making up these stories. And what is amazing thing is, this is super fundamentally important because every time we do metaphors, every time we create fantasies, every time we create some kind of stories, we are actually making them tangible in our own lives, because they become kind of like a fantasy-looking thing becomes a tangibly, really serious thing that you go outside and you make changes. And this is the part you are going to see in the case studies that I have done, that how this fantasy and reality kind of became a reality for me in the adult life. So scientifically, in play, because we have so many sensors and we kind of start to make sense of our world, we actually make all these connections and we make them tangible. So play has different types of play, and we call them object play, symbolic play, active play, and then games, which is the rules, and also we have the social play. And social play is fundamentally important because you become socialized, but you can only do it in the proximity of people. And this is kind of like interesting, because then you collect all this information. So I'm going to tie this into play and innovation, how it happens. Those kind of research, those kind of information, they come naturally to you. But you have to know how to make sense out of them. And this is the part which is like information and knowledge. When the information becomes a reality, it kind of becomes really tangible, really stepping stones, actually. You really have to put some kind of a story inside them. And the minute you put a story, then there's a time. And the time becomes a reality, because then you can go into the following it up, and kind of like a user journey and the meaning journey starts to happen. And for me, from all of these, like different types of play and how you describe it, actually play is really making connections. It is making connections with ourselves, first of all, because that's how we put ourselves in the middle of our world. And then that's also how we make connections with the environment, and also how we make connections with the other people. And it's interesting that when you look at children, again, at the age of 4, the theory of mind just develops, which means they are just trying to understand that there is somebody else other than them. And that's the time you really have to be playing, because that's the time you are actually going to make the best connections. And that's why for me, play is not just about play. It's not just about for the fun, or it's not just about being physically fit, but it's really all about actually going into deeper level of making the connections to be able to make better meanings for your life. And when you look at the mind, how we actually think, and how we actually tie it into the playfulness and creativity, is the divergence and the convergence are super important, because the divergent thinker is going to look from like a scanning the whole information. And the divergent thinker is going to use the imagination, the emotions, the empathy, and everything. But the convergence is also important, because that's the time you are making the lateral connections. You are starting to analyze and synthesize the whole information. So it's kind of like, it's almost like going into your bedroom. You have all the stuff everywhere, and then you have to put them in order. And that's the time you really make some kind of a substantial kind of reasoning, and how you are going to prioritize different things. And those two, they work together. They are kind of like a bird's wings. They come together so that you can become really creative. And that's the time the story, the culture, and everything really works. And that's why playfulness fundamentally is important, because that's the time you are going between the right and the left brain. You are kind of jumping different ideas, putting them together, organizing them, but also recreating everything. And I think there are great products out there which can be seen as playful at the end. One of them is, of course, the Velcro, and how it is coming from. It's from the nature. You look at everything, and if that person wasn't a playful person, then you wouldn't be able to come to the idea of the Velcro can become from a plant which was always annoying you while you are running. And the other thing is, I love Dyson's purifier, because it's kind of like looking at something has been done forever, doesn't have to continue, and you can look at it from a different perspective. You can get rid of the blades, but still it can be a great purifier. And when you look at the Post-its, what I like about it is, in play, there is nothing a word as fail, but you can always take challenges, you can always take risks, and those risks can take you to an amazing different part. And Post-it, as you know, it was actually a mistake. It wasn't supposed to be some kind of a easy peeling glue thing. It was actually had to be something like a duct tape which couldn't move at all. So it's that giving permission to be playful and giving permission to that playfulness, the end result, is very important. And when you look at this kind of like a connection between play, creativity, and innovation, and how I would say it is, in play, you are actually kind of letting yourself go and scan and learn new things. In creativity, you pull them and you try to give a value to it. And the innovation part of it is really you start to create substantial amount of value creation. But innovation cannot happen without the playfulness. That's impossible. Maybe not all play or creativity is going to end up being an innovative item, but innovation always will need the imagination, the playfulness, and the creativity. And it's all about connecting the dots. It's all about how you connect those dots and how they are going to be meaningful for you, because you are the one who is the engine to create and put them together so that you can make a new meaning within the culture that you are in. And in my play workshops, I start to create different stories, and the stories actually came from these kind of, in order to put people into different divergent thinking, I always make them paint, and I ask them not to make any sense out of it in the beginning, but then we turn them and create different stories about them. And it's been super fun because, as I said, I'm Turkish. I love doing Turkish cup reading, and this is from my Turkish cups, and I turn them into different kind of stories. And it's quite fun just to exercise every day and making up stories and how do you actually generate them. And also, as I said, I like to make play and thinking very tangible. I like them to be physical, and I started to use this futuring part and in order to understand how different materials and also different objects can mean together and to turn us to be more playful. I ended up creating play workshops, and these play workshops are actually kind of to see the future and how do you actually come up with the scenario planning, how do you actually even see the vision of yourself, where you can head to. So this one is particularly from Warwick University, and we were trying to understand the new students and their pain when they're coming from the airport to go to Warwick. And they played with marshmallows, they laughed, they made fun of it, and the whole experience became a bit more real so that we could actually look at the problems and question them and solve them. This one was done with Amnesty International, and we were trying to understand the organization, what happened. So imagine these people are like very serious people, and we were kind of putting together with the cubes and different blocks and making up like stories so that they can actually see what is really going on within the industry, within their organization, and we can make them talk about it. And this one is with a company in Turkey, and they were trying to understand their own sales department. And that night is a salesperson who is kind of going into Anatolia and fighting with the other competitors. I didn't want to ask what happened to the other people because it almost sounded like he was trying to kill all of them, but it's just so fun. You start to see when they are telling the stories, the metaphoric way of saying, you start to see the depth of their own issues and how they can actually solve it. And this one is from an education conference, and we were trying to come up with the next generation education and how it should be. And one of the idea was that we are going to be connected to everything and anything around our world, and that's going to bring us all the information, and that we are going to educate both parts, like the plants, even animals, and we are going to share that information to each other. So in play, it's not like a work and play. I see it as the play deprivation is the biggest word because that's the worst thing that you can do. And what play deprivation means that you don't play at all, or you don't become playful at all, which is the most horrible thing you can do. And Dr. Stuart Brown always tells, when we stop playing, we stop developing, and I totally agree with him. That's totally true. And the minute that we stop developing, we actually age. We start to get older and older. So the people who are very cheerful, like you see the child in them, they are kind of like a keep playing probably. They are keep making up stories. They are kind of keep exploring and inventing and making things. And it's very, I would only say it again and again. It's very important to keep playing because when you go into the nature and if you have a plant, you have to prune them sometimes. It's kind of like that. When you play, it prunes the old things in yourself. It kind of takes the old ones and brings in the new things so that you can actually revitalize and you can become the new self. And that can live longer and longer. So I would finish this with Bernard Shaw's quote saying that we don't stop playing because we grow old, but we grow old because we stop playing. And that is, I hope we always keep playing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yesim. That was wonderful. We'd like to open up the room for questions. And NASA has a question right there.
NASA is one of the perfect audience, always has a question to ask.
Please.
Yes.
Hello. I have a question about what's your opinion about more kids moving towards playing on their tablets or phones or whatever? Do you think that type of play is also helps with creativity and all that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's like a common, most important question. I can give you so many, I can talk about it whole day, but I'm not going to do that. Very quickly, I'll say there are so many different ways to look at it. I think we need to understand that the technology is just a tool, and playfulness is our way of interacting with the world. So it depends on how we take that digital world and technology, and if it enhances our creativity, then I think we need to be using. And there are things that are really nice platforms are being created. So I would highly recommend them. For example, like Scratch, MIT Media Lab Scratch is amazing platform, even though it's a digital world, and there are some digital and physical converged kind of toys coming up, and we will be seeing so much more of them. So I think it's the moderation is important, and what kind of content you are using, and why you are using it, and how you are dealing with it, and which age group. So there are so many different levels of it. But I would say the physical interaction is the key. That's no question. But I think we need to learn the other digital part and platforms. And then we need to learn how to deal with them. Because both worlds have the creativity, definitely.
All right,
Nice.
Great. Thank you. So do we have one more question in the audience? Because if we don't, I have one. So,
Go
all right.
ahead, I guess.
Let me go with where do you see the future of play going?
Future of play, first of all, play is not going anywhere, right? It's our fundamental need. I would say it's a need. It's kind of like oxygen. If we get rid of play, forget it,
Yeah.
it's finished. So it's not going anywhere. It's just going to become, I see a couple of different, actually, versions of it. One of them is every one of us are becoming playful. I think we are giving the permission to be playful, even the adults, which is a great thing. We see more and more, we talk about play and how it is important, the power of it. At the same time, we see that there's so much digital and physical kind of meeting points, the screen time, that's becoming a lot of playful. And then also there is a backlash towards the screen, which is taking you to the outside world, and you are actually becoming more about nature, more connected with the outdoors, and no screen time. So you start to see that's also emerging, that people are trying to be staying away from that kind of like non-interactive world, not like I would say non-proximity interaction, because in the screen, also in the digital world, in social media, you are interacting in some way, but not in a physical way. So, but basically, sorry, to answer that, there is a merge between the physical and digital, and then also there is an area which people are going to be staying away from the digital to keep themselves very playful in physically.
Okay, great.
Nice.
All right. I think we can wrap up now. Thank you so much, Miss Yesim Kunter. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Yesim. طيب